Welcome. I'm Joe Arredondo. I'm Director of Landmark Arts in the School of Arts, Speakers and Exhibit Programs. And today we have another one of our race and social justice in the arts visiting speakers, and so who will be introduced shortly. We will be using the Q&A feature to after the talk. So write your question into the Q&A feature, not into the chat, and then that'll be moderated, and we'll get as many of those answered before we then have to go on to the Student Voices discussion. If you're not signed up for the Student Voices discussion and want to join in, it's a more intimate meeting where students and the guest speaker can interact with each other and talk about the deeper nitty-gritty of working as a person of color in the arts in America today. That link is in the chat. You can register and then we'll switch over to the meeting immediately after this. Our speaker series is funded by a grant from the Helen Jones Foundation, a local foundation, and then we also receive monies from cultural activities fees that students pay to support programming across campus. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over to Boriana Rusanova Ina,
Aina, yes, yes.
Ina, who is on our painting faculty and will introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Joe, so much. And thank you to Landmark Arts for this opportunity to bring Lisa Jarrett today. I am so very excited to hear Lisa's talk. And as Joe pointed out, for any of the students who are here in attendance, please do consider joining the new programming initiative called Student Voices, which is moderated by Corina Carmona and Sarah Jones, and it will be from 1 p.m. to about 1:45, so immediately after Lisa's talk. So without further ado, here I'm going to introduce Lisa Jarrett. She's an artist and an educator and an associate professor of community and context arts at Portland State University School of Art and Design. Lisa is a co-founder and co-director of KS MoCA, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. School Museum of Contemporary Art, and Harriet Tubman Middle School Center for Expanded Curatorial Practice, both in Northeast Portland, Oregon, and the Artists Collective of Art 25, Art in the 25th Century. Her intersectional practice considers the politics of difference within a variety of settings, including schools, landscapes, fictions, racial imaginaries, studios, communities, museums, galleries, walls, mountains, mirrors, floors, rivers, and lenses. She exists and makes socially engaged work within the African diaspora. She currently discovered that her primary medium is questions. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Jarrett.
Thank you so much, Boriana, for such a lovely introduction and for the invitation to come and speak with your students today and your broader community. Everybody, I'm so happy to be here. Feel free, you can throw questions in the Q&A, as Joe said at the beginning, and I will make sure to review those with Boriana at the end of the conversation and get that information right back to you as best we can. And I look forward to the Student Voices portion of our conversation today too. So please do sign up if you're even remotely interested, because that's how we can just get, like Joe said, down and dirty and into the nitty gritty. Anything you want to know, I'm very open and I love to talk with students. So I'm going to switch gears and just start sharing my screen. And Boriana, since you're here, if you see something and you want to interrupt me or you have a question sort of mid-presentation, please feel free to do so. I'm very informal, even though I have this big formal presentation. So if a question pops up for you or for somebody in the audience, I'm happy to address it sort of in real time. And today I'm going to be talking with you about one really particular and expansive part of my practice. It's a project called KS MoCA, or the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Museum of Contemporary Art. You have probably gotten a sense already. I like long titles that are challenging to say. I'm sorry for that. But really, I think we're hoping that our titles really do give you some insight, our names, insight into the work. Very simply, KS MoCA is an art museum inside a public school, a functioning public school here in Northeast Portland, Oregon, where I'm based. And this was a project that is co-authored between myself and one of my colleagues. His name is Harold Fletcher, and he directs the MFA in Art and Social Practice program here at PSU, a program that I also teach in. So what I'd like to do today to give you all some insight just into this one component of my practice. Hopefully it's able to touch on all of the things I'm interested in very broadly, but this project is fairly expansive. And so I thought I would use it as a way to kind of talk about all of these moments. What you're seeing behind the title slide here is a photograph of students from Dr. MLK Jr. School, our project participants, reenacting a historic image from the Civil Rights movement from the 1963 March on Washington for a project called Our Civil Rights Revisited. And it's just a way to let you meet some of the students and see how we're trying to really connect the things that they are understanding and learning within their K-5 curriculum directly to their lived experience and honoring that experience and who they are as young artists and all kinds of other things. So within this, I want to back up for a second to just kind of contextualize the reasons that I really believe in this kind of work, what the power is for social practice work. I'm also a studio-based artist, so I kind of have both of those things going. But this excerpt from an essay by Asada Nicole Richards entitled A Soft Place to Stand, Escaping the Interlocking Systems of Race, Class, and Gender sets really a really nice tone for the larger themes present in all of this work. And Richards says, I've come to realize that artists are excellent role models for demonstrating the power available to us in challenging the limits of our material conditions and the aptitude for achieving new possibilities with limited resources. This essay, which is excellent, is included in a book about Project Row Houses, which is a project that very much inspires me. It's based in Houston, Texas, in Third Ward, founded by Rick Lowe and a group of other artists as well. So just to kind of set the tone there, and then sort of also explain that more broadly, the things that I'm interested in doing. Boriana mentioned this notion of the politics of difference within my work. And the way that plays out is how I think about these two major ideas, margin and center. What's marginal and what's centered, and what happens when you sort of try to convey so many complex ideas around practice with maybe 3 images. And in this case, it's 2 words, and I've just introduced this 3rd image, which is a circle or a symbol. And when you introduce this circle based on where you place it on the page, you begin to think about what these words mean in relationship not only to one another, but in how they sort of play out within a space, a container. And in this case, that container is a rectangle, a white box, right? So kind of playing with these notions across all of my work has been really important to me over the years. And within the context of a project like KS MoCA, I really like to anchor myself with inquiries, with questions. And so the project conceptually kind of starts with these kinds of inquiries. Who gets to be an artist? Where does real, quote unquote, art happen? Whose histories inform our knowledge and practice? How are our own identities related to and impacted by the work we do? What is the value of making mistakes in practice? How do you build real platforms both with and for youth participants, right? And so that's a question very much about audience. And then how can the resources we have access to be shared, right? And so within the context of a project like KS MoCA, this set of questions really continues to drive how we think about work. But the question you're probably asking yourself at this point is like, well, what is KS MoCA? What does it mean to have a museum inside a public school? And in very literal terms, the museum occupies the walls and the spaces between. We're also in the classrooms. We do rotating exhibitions. We do a lot of different things to try to connect our students not only to what it means to be an artist, but to expose them to all of the attendant careers within the arts beyond being an artist. So I'm going to introduce the project by sharing a very brief video with you here, and then I'll kind of drill down into some of the specifics. Oops, this always happens. Oh, want it to just play. Here we go, play.
Maybe I'll read a couple more and then I'll just show you all of them. I want you to paint. Do you have a question? This is a painting of skin colors, yeah.
Like really love like a black
When I look at this image,
underneath the influence faded.
I've been working with Cares Mocha for about 2.5 years now, and it's really fun to get a new experience and meet new people and different artists.
This is Jorge from KS Mocha Podcast signing out. Da!
Oh, I miss these. I miss being in real time, everybody. This is just a really brief introduction, and it's a nice way to try to give you the sense of what it's like to actually be on site and in conversation with the kids that we work with. But I thought I would also try to kind of share with you what some of these projects really look like on the ground in a deeper way. The slide that you're looking at right now is just kind of a laundry list of all of the different aspects of our programs. We began in 2015 with our public programs. And since 2015, we've really expanded to include so many different components, using a museum as a framework, right? But also embracing this as an art project for myself and for Harold. So in the same way that a studio-based artist thinks about a painting as their practice, we think about KS Mocha as our artwork. And while it sort of exists in the world as an institution, that flexibility and that approach, that positioning toward the work as an artist really does allow us to think about it differently and allows us a different kind of flexibility, I think. So we're kind of like performing as an institution, and in some ways we are, right? And in many other ways, we are artists. We are scrappy, and we just want to try to figure out how we can make something really interesting happen in our community. The students at KS Mocha, our school is a highly underserved school, predominantly made up of brown and black students in a historically African-American neighborhood where ongoing gentrification is very much a part of what our reality is. It's also the neighborhood that I live in and that Harold lives and works in too. So I wanted to talk to you about sort of this initial modality of shifting the expectation around what it is that kids do in relationship to artwork. And so our first project, our inaugural exhibition, was a curatorial project for the students. And we worked with, this is completely out of order. I apologize for that. We worked with the Magnum Photo Agency, the photography agency based in Paris. They were doing a project, 11 of those photographers, called Postcards from America. And they gave us access very generously to 1,000 images from this collection. They've been visiting cities across the United States. And out of those 1,000 images, we had 10 classrooms curate 10 images each for a total of 100 images to see in the school. And during the opening reception, we built custom cases, and the work that the students selected, not the work that the students made, right, was what we exhibited along with wall labels that the students co-authored. And so this was intended to signal that it's very important to empower young people to create and celebrate the environment around them that they're in every day. And that was one of the things that we decided we would do to start. And those images, now a selection of those images, continue to exist as part of our permanent collection installed in a hallway at the school. And so this is a sampling of what some of those images currently look like. I was just at the school for the first time in a year on Wednesday, and it was really touching to sort of step back into the work in physical and real time to see what things have come along like. And I'll update you toward the end about sort of our approach during the pandemic. But in addition to curating the work of sort of famous and renowned artists on an international level, our students also, we have a small group of students that are called the Student Curatorial Committee or Student Advisory Committee, and they have a dedicated gallery space within the school where they curate exhibitions. And in this case, this was a selection of work from students in their school. We framed the works, they wrote a statement, and we hung them and held an opening. You can see a couple of the kids here just sort of viewing and passing through the work. And importantly, notice the eye level of things here, right? So things are at the level of young people. Grown-ups have to bend down. For them, it's just right there. And we think that that's really important for the students, that they really do feel like it's for them. In addition to things like curatorial practice, our students are also artists. They're docents, and in some ways they are historians. And our Civil Rights Revisited, that was one of those images you saw at my intro slide, is one way that we thought about how we could activate these other components of artistic practice, right? And so what you see here on the left is another reenactment photo. This is from the 1965 March on Selma, and the students reenacted that on the school grounds in fall. We had a local professional photographer, Julie Keefe, generously volunteer her time to actually take the images. And then we framed those images, and in their 5th grade class, students learned about the history of these important civil rights moments in the history of the United States, both nationally and locally. And they sort of had little scripts, and they could present it to their other student visitors. And so on the labels, the students' reports were reproduced, as well as the original image that they were reenacting. So they could kind of have all of these different cues when they wanted to present their work. And it was a really, these images now, this hallway, this horrible green is now a different color, but the images have been repositioned and also are permanently installed in the school just outside the main office. And so that's what greets you when you come into the school. But one of our main anchoring things, one of the things that we really wanted to use to signal how this work could sort of be relatable to the broader arts community, was to think about the things that typically happen in museums and to replicate them within the school so that we could kind of raise the level of professionalization and appreciation for the work that the students do. So we've worked with a whole group of artists over the past few years. And one of the main goals, I should say, is to sort of ensure that the same kinds of artists and work that the students might encounter at a place like the Portland Art Museum, which is our local major museum, it would be those kinds of experiences that they would just be having at their school on a regular basis. In the same way that students are very familiar with libraries because they exist in their school all the time. And when they go to a public library, they're already oriented to what that space is. We thought that we could build their familiarity around museum practice and art practice in a similar way. So what this means is that we invite artists in on a rotating basis to host workshops with our students to sort of open up their work and maybe teach them new skills. This is Arnold J. Kemp, who was just here last year before the shutdown. Arnold decided to do a workshop to teach the kids about how the eye works. And can I just tell you that this was one of the most fun workshops imaginable. He had us order flashlights and mirrors. And I'm like, so the kids are going to shine lights into their eyes? is this safe? But it was wonderful because they could sort of see the iris expand and contract. They were just delighted, and it was play, but it was science, and it was building somehow to art. This is Arnold, who's a really wonderful, wonderful artist. If you have the interest in looking up his work, I encourage you to do so. He's based in Chicago now, but used to have a relationship to Portland. And so, excuse me. Those workshops with the artist, in Arnold's case, he actually did two. One that was really about building your understanding of vision, and then another that was really about connecting the students to some of his physical studio art practice. He's been working a lot with aluminum foil and sort of playing with this notion of masks. He taught them, so this is his work on the right, and this is how it would be displayed on the hallway, to think about those same things for themselves. And so what you see next to Arnold's work is a whole series of the students' projects inspired by that work. And we hang those things side by side to, again, sort of reorient us toward the hierarchy of how we view work that is made by young people or children. At the opening reception, in collaboration with our college students, we also have an undergraduate college class that meets weekly at the school, to come up with an activity for the young student participants as a docent activity. Because surprisingly, children don't really like what docents do in regular museums. They need to have play and interaction. And so they decided that the students could do like an eye exam with visitors, just like they got to do with Arnold. And so it's kind of hard to see here, but this piece of paper has a hole cut out of it, and it's on a clear clipboard. And this young student is examining the eye of this visitor, and she's writing and taking notes and drawing everything she sees in this visitor's eye. And then she's going to give her this analysis of her eye as her takeaway, to kind of share with her what some of the things she learned in her workshop with Arnold. And then this is just another image to give you a sense of how beautiful these students' pieces looked hung in the hallway. That these works were so gorgeous. They rival graduate student work, in my opinion. I mean, they're really fantastic pieces. And the students basically made masks out of actual foil. We scanned them and printed them out large scale, and then returned them to the students, where they went in and hand colored and added and adjusted what things they wanted to see. And then we framed those pieces. They also wrote labels, which you kind of can't see here. So we're facilitating a lot of things, right? The students aren't framing the work. They're not doing the typing and the printing. But we're really trying to elevate. Again, this is all at their eye level. This is right where they line up for lunch every day, their work. And some of the feedback has been like, instead of hitting the walls now, they just stand and look at the artwork and show each other what they did. And I just think that's a really beautiful sort of anecdotal way of understanding feedback or impact. And just very briefly, I'm going to show you a few other slides of what I'm trying to, basically, we're really interested in process. And what I'm trying to do with these images is invite you into seeing what it looks like to be there, instead of always showing finished products like the exhibition, right? It's nice to see what it looks like on the back end side, because that's where the engagement really happens. So this is a group of college students meeting the illustrator Carson Ellis before she works in collaboration with students, so that they can get some professional experience as well. And all of the college students kind of help facilitate the workshops with the artists. So in the classroom, when we're having a workshop, there are adults, there are college students, there are graduate students, there are young people, there are professional artists, there are sometimes parents and teachers. It's a whole crew of folks facilitating our students through these experiences. At opening receptions, this lovely young one is doing an interview for the podcast with one of our filmmakers, Nora Coley, and this is sort of one of our resident dogs. This is another artist that works with us. This is Michael Bernard Stevenson Jr., alumni from our social practice program. And this is Monica Meyer, who joined us from Mexico City a few years ago to do a project called Abrazos, or Hugs. And it was about consensual contact, and what a challenging topic for young people. But Monica taught us that this is where most of the trauma happens. And so it's important to open up the conversation. When we worked with artists like Byron Kim, who you see on the right, in consultation with one of our students, Michael, talking to him about what it means to make a Sunday painting, which is a project Byron's been doing every week on Sunday for many years now. And then some of those students from the podcast interviewing Byron after the fact, so that we could have that opportunity to share that. And let's see here, I'm just going to keep moving on. Byron's work, he did a project back in the 90s, some of you may remember or have heard about, called Synecdoche, where he was painting the skin tones of a lot of folks in his community. And in collaboration with the Parent Teacher Association, and actually inspired by the public lecture that Byron gave at the school library, Byron came back and did a version of this project with us at the school. Instead of painting, which would be impractical, in this setting, instead it ended up being based on photography. So what you're seeing here are the photograph skin tones of the inner arms of every child in the school at the time. And Byron decided that we would call it School Colors. And that project is now currently installed in the library semi-permanently right here. And there's a list to the right. You can't see it in this photo, but it's a grid of all the names. And so the librarian keeps a little red laser pointer, and the students can run up and find their name and then point to where they actually are in this grid. And it's just such a lovely way to represent who the students are in the school that is both about portraiture, but interestingly ends up being about the wide variety of people and identities present in the school. Byron, incidentally, was one of my art heroes for years and still is. But when I was young and in undergrad and looking at this work, it really opened up the entire way I was able to understand modern art as a person of color and how those things could apply to me. And so to be able to connect him with my students all these years later, so I'm talking about the mid 90s, and now we're in we're in 2020. That's horrifying. It just really was a beautiful opportunity for me and for our students. Local artists also with really well-established records like Samantha Wall come in and teach about process, exhibiting their work in the school. Oh, and you can kind of see back here on the right, these are where those projects, this is the school office is right across from here. So those are civil rights revisited images. Tricky to see in the info there. And then artists like Chitra Ganesh, based in Brooklyn, New York, who came in and did an amazing project with us about everyday superheroes. Our PSU students, our college students, produce a zine for each artist that gets distributed to all 300 or so students in the school, so that even if you're not able to attend the workshop, you still have some opportunity to learn about the artist's work and understand the work that you're seeing in your school every day. We had Leila Ali out a few years ago as well, who is based in Massachusetts, whose work if you're not familiar with, you should also really look up. Another one of my favorites, she did a project with us called Not Self-Portraits. It was really fantastic. She was amazing with the students, and she kept teaching, these were 5th grade students, to be brave, because what we kind of start to see in 5th grade is that students start to judge their work as being good or not good enough. And she was just so good at teaching them about that aspect of what it meant to make work. Artist lectures like Hank Willis Thomas and projects like his broader project called The Truth Booth from the Cause Collective have been hosted on site at KS MoCA. This is the school's playground, and this is the school in the background here. This is Hank the first time he came out to give a talk for us. This was a few years ago. He was actually out again last year. And we also try to give our students the opportunity to do things like introduce the artists. So this is Jameson. Jameson, when we said, Jameson, do you want to do this intro? Jameson, just give me a lectern. I'm good. A lectern, because he knew that word. I don't know. But it was really lovely to give the students the opportunity to sort of be the intro to the artist to their peers as well. And Monica Meyer, another public lecture, and it was so lovely to have her. She feels like an elder. You know, she's been working since the 70s around ideas of feminism and art, and she's sitting in this beautiful rocking chair talking to the children. She felt just like an abuela, like a grandmother there, talking to them about hugs. And then the students in her workshop invented new ways of giving hugs, where they had to collaborate in teams of 2. And we did these little performance pieces that we recorded, and they became a really beautiful part of that connection with Monica, and are also in the catalog. We have done a ton of adapting because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And if I have time, I will pop over to our website later to kind of show you enliven what some of this really means. And I encourage you to take a look at our website, because honestly, the website does a much better job than I do at this point in trying to like organize and archive all of this. And many thanks to Amanda Lee Evans, who is alumna from the Art and Social Practice program and one of our program directors at KS MoCA now. But during the pandemic, we have a virtual artist lecture series and residency program going where we have 8 artists/artist groups we're working with all year. We have 2 online projects. One is called Learning Outside the Lines, and everybody here today, you're welcome to participate. There's also another project called KS MoCA Conceptual Art at Home, where artists that have worked with us in the past have come up with prompts for ways that students can make art projects with what's around them, inspired by their own work. And you'll see projects contributed by myself and other artists and Harold, and within that as well. And like I said, I'll jump over to the website to give you a sense of that in a minute, but please do take a look. And then briefly, I also wanted to let you know what happens when you continue a project for a long time. And what we started to think about wanting to do is to follow the students from elementary school to middle school with a longer term vision of maybe having a way to connect with them in high school so that they would have some sort of experience following them through. In the US, it's a K through 12 education. Where they could really continue to sort of flourish and experience different aspects of artistic practice. So the Harriet Tubman Middle School Center for Expanded Curatorial Practice is kind of a satellite project, and it takes place at Harriet Tubman Middle School, also in my neighborhood. And this project works a little bit differently. So while KS MoCA is huge, it's the whole school, immersive, a million little projects and programs. The Tubman curatorial team functions more like a club. So there's about 6 or 7 students that Harold and I can work with weekly. We've continued it via Google Meet during the pandemic. And the students work on different projects with us that are sort of about illuminating what curatorial practice might really mean. And to give you a sense of what some of those things are, when we were in person in the school, they would do small exercises, curatorial exercises. In this case, we were looking at the work of Kerry James Marshall online, having the students select out of his gorgeous array of paintings. Oh my God, he's one of my favorite painters. I see Mariana being like, yes, 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 because the work is so good. They were selecting what they liked and they were describing why, and they were writing labels and curatorial statements. And then this work exists in the school for their cohort to see. Kind of a curatorial exercise, if you will, but with some, stakes, but low stakes, right? We also have done exhibitions. This is the case just to the right of that Kerry James Marshall work, where they're thinking about the namesake of their school, and in this case, Harriet Tubman and her legacy. And so what would it mean to look at what contemporary pop culture objects featuring Harriet Tubman are, and could we bring them into the school so the students could see them? So yeah, we reproduced, there's the Tubman stamp. We did a reproduction of that. I'll tell you that story. FedEx really didn't want me to print it. And I just did what artists do. I said, so if I take it over to the self print, can you stop me? And the guy just looked at me and I just did it. I was like, this is ridiculous. And so, all of these, there's this great pair of sneakers here. And this is Sincere, who's one of the students in the project, sharing it with the then school principal. So he's walking her through the exhibition and everything that they did. Again, they wrote wall labels and a curatorial statement. We also wanted to help enliven and create an informational piece for all of the students at the school. Who was Harriet Tubman really when you go to a school with her namesake? And so we collaborated with an artist, an illustration-based artist here in Portland, Melanie Stevens. Her work is amazing. She also has another collaborative project called the Nat Turner Project, if anybody's interested. And the students in a workshop with Melanie selected 20 events from Harriet Tubman's life. And they selected out of those 20, 10 they wanted Melanie to illustrate. And this is a life-size vinyl portrait of Tubman here on the left. And this piece will run about 30 feet in one of the school hallways, highlighting this timeline of Harriet Tubman's life, co-authored by the students. And hopefully it's getting installed like right now, because again, we haven't been able to be in this building since we developed the work. But this group of students has also had the opportunity to work with major art centers outside of the city. And this is a project that we just completed for the John Michael Kohler Art Center as part of a larger exhibition called Between You and Me that was curated by the then senior curator, Shannon Stratton, who's now at Oxbow. But we were invited along with 7 other artists to participate in this work as the Harriet Tubman Center for Expanded Curatorial Practice. And what we did was select the work of an artist here in Portland whose name is Lawrence Oliver III. He is an adult with developmental disabilities that works with an organization called Public Annex that supports artists like him through both the arts and through farming. And so this work, the work that you see here is Lawrence's work, the chandeliers, the trees, the jack-o'-lanterns, these wonderful vases and stones that was selected by the curatorial team. We had it created and shipped, all very official, all very formal, and installed in the exhibition. And really trying to showcase. So because this exhibit, it was called Between You and Me, and Shannon was so interested in how artists investigate and explore care in their various practices. And this was our particular contribution. It was a phenomenal project. In addition to selecting and curating the work of Lawrence Oliver III, as part of our artwork for the exhibition, we created the catalog that accompanied the show and showcased the work of all the artists in that show. And so the students decided they wanted to call the catalog Care is Like a Forest. And this is just a spread of Lawrence's work, but there are a whole group of other artists in this show, including folks like Chloe Bass, Sarah Klugage, John Prius, Christine Wong Yap, General Sisters, lots of really great artists that they then got to interview. Basically what we did was interview each of those artists and produce those interviews as part of the publication alongside images of their work. We were also able, Hank Willis Thomas, who you saw before at KS MoCA, has returned and did a major exhibition at the Portland Art Museum just last year. It was called All Things Being Equal. And we were able, with a lot of facilitation and communication between the Portland Art Museum and our, so they're sort of community partners in a way, we were able to get a private tour of this for the curatorial team. And among other things, get the students to really engage with the themes in the work. And what that culminated in ultimately was, again, a catalog, but this was our first opportunity to really deeply connect the work and exhibition that happened at KS MoCA, because we simultaneously had our own Hank Willis Thomas show while Hank had a show at the Portland Art Museum. So 2 exhibitions in Portland of Hank's work at the same time at 2 different locations. And then we had our curatorial students do some deeper dives into sort of reflecting on what their visit was and producing that information in the catalog. And these students also had an opportunity to interview Hank Willis Thomas, and that interview was included in this larger catalog as well. And so it was a really wonderful opportunity to get them into the museum, but to more, a deeper interaction with the work than they might get on a group field trip for the whole 7th grade, for example. We also bring curators in. We did an intensive summer program in preparation for the Portland Biennial in 2019, where the curatorial team, 1 virtually and 2 in person, came and worked with us on campus. And this is me over here. Harold's probably taking the picture, so you can't see him. But this is how the students were preparing for the Portland Biennial, which meant that they were interviewing a bunch of artists that they were most interested in. So the curators came and said, here are all the artists. And the kids said, we want to interview these 5. These are the 5 we want to know more about. So we invited them. This is all at the college campus. This is Lynn Yarn in the center. They're interviewing Lynn. And they did this with a number of artists. Then we went to Distracta, which is the art center where the biennial is hosted. And Yael Amir, one of the curators here, was talking to them about what it means to lay out a show. Like, how do you then take all this work and put it in place? They wrote the curatorial statement for the biennial as their contribution, and they got to see it, right? Like, now it's all designed and pretty and fancy, and they're like, oh my God, we did this. And this is how it looked on the wall. And it's interesting to see how the curators sort of were able to frame it as an artwork, and it got a label too. So it's really, really, really meta in the way that we kind of love. And then they wrote the wall labels for all of the other artworks in the show as well. And so this is an artwork by Jarrett Matani, a Portland-based artist who runs a graduate program here at Pacific Northwest College of Art, another institution in my city. And this is just a sample of what one of those labels kind of would have looked like. So this piece, it's like, we're not trying to sort of erase or suck out the kidness of it, right? It's just them responding. And this is one of my favorites because they're actually yelling at New York City here. So they describe the work. This artist focuses on Tamanous the meteorite. It was stolen property of an indigenous Oregon tribe and now lives in the Museum of Natural History in New York City. Jarrett focuses on Tamanous's journey there and is now imagining its journey back home to Oregon where it belongs. We like that the work addresses that the meteorite should be returned to where it originally landed. If someone took something from you of personal and cultural value, you might like to have it back. We hope you hear this, New York. And so I love how they're using the labels as an opportunity to like talk, right? To like communicate a message. And you know, some people like them, some people didn't like them, but I think it was a really interesting and unexpected way to include young people's voices in contemporary practice. As part of the biennial, they also hosted a live panel with those artists that they selected. It was tons of fun. And this is just sort of giving you a sense, just reminding you that they are in fact still kids. And so during our summer intensive, each day we took a break, we had lunch somewhere on campus, and then we played on the playground before we went back to our curatorial work. And I just kind of want to remind folks that play is always important. Even when you're a grown up, like these breaks really made this, they still ask about this. They're like, can we come back? Are we coming back to school, to campus? Can we go back to college? And just to hear middle school students say, can we go back to college? I mean, just like really opens up the whole way you see the university, right? As somebody who lives in it, right? This is our universe. So I'll close with a quote from the students. They say that usually this kind of curatorial work doesn't happen with middle school students, and that's an achievement in and of itself for us. We want to tell other people our age to pursue their dreams and to not stop until you get there. And if that's not everything that you ever need to know to encourage you along your path, I really don't know what is, but I have this pinned up on my fridge because it just actually helps me get through my days. Don't stop. I've got dreams. I can do it. And so if you want to learn more about the projects, the website is ksmocha.com. And you are all invited to follow us on Instagram. That's sort of the place where we're posting regularly. If you want to see some of our lectures or talks, everything's there. And that's just at ksmocha. So I have a few more minutes, and I'm just going to ask Brianna what she thinks here. Brianna, do you want me to switch and go to the website and show you some of the pandemic stuff, or should we do Q&A first?
I think another 5 minutes. We could probably spend, yeah, let's do another 5 minutes.
Okay, let me try to, in a sophisticated way, not show you my 8 million tabs, which I'm sure are open. Here we go. Okay. I don't know how you guys feel about tab life these days, but I always have 1,000 tabs open and I can never find anything. It's supposed to help me, and in fact, it does not. Okay, so this is the KS MoCA website. And I think that one of the questions I've been getting a lot lately is like, how have you guys survived or pivoted to respond to the pandemic? And so what we're doing this year, as I mentioned earlier, we're hosting 8 artist/artist groups as artists in residence. And part of what that means is that those artists are giving, so we're on a quarter system here, which means we have 3 academic terms during a school year. And so each of those artists is coming to speak with us and with our students 3 times over the year, 1 time per term. And in addition to the lectures, each of these artists is developing a smaller project to build with one of the classes in a virtual format. And so each week, Thursday mornings, 10 a.m. Pacific time, you guys can tune into their live stream talks on our YouTube channel. So that, and each of the artists have kind of been building over the year. So like introduction to their work, a little deeper, and maybe a little more information about what they're planning to do in their workshop. So coming up next week will be Intisar Abioto, a fantastic Portland-based photographer, artist, performance artist. I think after that we might have Paula Wilson, but the schedule's here again. Paula's based in Carrizozo, New Mexico. And so it's really great. She can come in and see us, right, and talk with us. She gave us an amazing tour of her studio. And these are who the other artists are, including Michael Bernard Stevenson Jr. Sohela.
Lisa, we're only seeing the presentation. Are you sharing
Oh,
something
I'm
online?
showing you
Yeah.
a whole website.
I'm so sorry. I was waiting for it and then it didn't happen. It's so the window is just showing the thank you, learn more about KS MoCA, but
That's
nothing's coming up in terms of like an online website.
okay, let me try another way here. Thank you for stopping me. Thank you, because none of what I said made any sense then with what you were seeing. That's hilarious. Okay, let's see if I go into present mode and just pull the link this way.
I think it's going to happen now.
Okay, are you seeing a web page with like a school picture on the left side?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I apologize, everybody. Thank you so much for stopping me. This is one of those things on Zoom you just really can't tell. You think it's still working and sometimes it just isn't. I was basically just walking folks through the artist residency and lecture series and giving you a visual of who these artists are. You all can access the live stream too. It's on our YouTube channel. This is Paula Wilson, who I was referencing just a moment ago, based in Carrizozo, New Mexico. And these are some of the other artists that are working with us this year. So it's a mix of artists at all different places in their career, from different places, either by origin or by history or by practice, really trying to build and curate a group of artists that are relatable to our students and the demographic in our school. And sort of posing that same question out to institutions more broadly, like what does it mean to represent the community to be responsible to a community, the community you're embedded in within the context of your curatorial practice, in this case, mine and Harold's, right? And so that's one way that we're trying to meet and address and have relevant programming during a pandemic. The other way, and these were two projects I referenced earlier, are through online opportunities for participants to continue to engage. Learning Outside the Lines, this is a logo designed by Mo, who's a third grader at the school, is a project. Yeah, Mo's pretty fantastic. He introduces our lectures too. So if you want to meet Mo, come on in, because it gives you the energy you need. I'm telling you, like whenever you're like, oh my God, and then Mo's like, I'm here. And you're like, okay, Mo, I can do anything. This is an artwork about breaking the rules of standardized education, and all that it is, it's not about object making, but it's about sharing stories of unexpected or unusual early learning experiences. And you can participate, anybody can participate by submitting an artwork that can include an image. And in terms of conceptual or context, you can think about this notion of retroactive claiming, and we've got a little essay about that there. So if you wanted to read the artworks, even if you didn't want to participate, to understand, you all can access that, and you can sort of see all of the different participants who have contributed. And they're claiming it as an artwork by doing the things that artists do. You title it, you date it, you honor and you note your collaborators, and then you tell us what that meant, right? And so it's a whole compilation of that. Some students, some artists, people from all over have been contributing, and we just love it, to be honest. And then there's another project that I have like no more minutes now, so sorry, called KS MoCA Conceptual Art at Home. And it's a series of prompts, and they're for grown-ups and kids, but you can see, like, so for example, my contribution was like, make an instrument at home. And it's inspired by, this is me and my dad. My dad taught himself to play the piano when he was little by making a cardboard piano. And so I was like, well, how cool is that? It was because of limited resources, right? He couldn't have a piano in his home. That wasn't possible within his family. But you'd think my dad plays piano like a concert pianist. So to think that he learned this way, right? It really made me think, well, what if students made up their own instrument at home and they really could learn to play it if they were so inclined? And so there's a whole, you can also submit to this too. And there's just all these little anecdotes for different things, like an outfit you would never wear. So they're playful and they're fun and they don't cost money, right? Because we realized that a lot of our students didn't have, they don't have any extra money, and we couldn't leave our houses. So it was like, what's around you right now? All these different ways of kind of kind of give people access to thinking about and making work within extreme limitations. And so if you'd like to know more or learn more about our projects or sort of explore some of these exhibitions more deeply or more broadly, you can see the website is really comprehensive, and you can sort of take a tour, a virtual tour in a sense, of what the history of these projects look like. Students design our posters for our lectures. They participate in all of our projects. This is a digital quilt. It's part of the For Freedom show, or excuse me, the Freedom Ride show. You can see what the workshops look like. You can see how they engage with different artists' works. All of these things. It's really deep, and it's pretty, if you get in here, you can kind of really get a deeper understanding of what the project is. You can look at what all of our publications look like, things of that nature. So I will stop here just in the interest of time and to respect everybody's time. And yeah, you are so welcome. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to share more about this work with you. And if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Lisa, so much. This was wonderful. I just want to remind everybody to post a question in the Q&A feature of this session, and maybe we can give folks a second to type out some questions. I have some, so I'll get started.
Okay.
I suppose just it's listening to everything you mentioned about KS MoCA and the extensive nature of all the programming, and we saw a lot of the students and how they were reacting and kind of even guiding all the programming. That was fascinating, but I kept wondering, what about the administrators and the parents? Did you ever, well, I'm sure you've heard some feedback from them, and what were their thoughts on everything that was happening? Or were they extremely supportive? Or did you ever hear anything that was like, oh, is this art? So I'm kind of curious to have you talk a little bit about that, like apart from the students, the community response to the project.
Oh, thank you so much for that question. Oh, yes. Okay, so it's really important, I think, to say and to state very explicitly, this project, even though it's like my project and Harold's project and all these things, this project only works because we are in full relationship and participation with the whole community. So we meet with the school administrators every week. We're continuing to do that in the pandemic in a virtual way. And that's the school principal, the school counselor, one of the community liaisons, and a person whose position is sort of international baccalaureate coordinator. It's a designation of school. So we have a weekly meeting, our team and their team, to make sure that we are supporting the right students, to make sure we're catching anything that we need to modify, or to just understand what the needs are of the full community. We're not operating independent of those entities. We also communicate regularly with the teachers, the classroom teachers, and the parents when it makes sense. So for example, Mo doing our introductions, that happens in collaboration with his mom, who of course is the one who prints the intro so he can read it and helps him pronounce words behind the screen when he's not sure how to say it. It's very much all of us coming together to support the kids. We think about the young people as our primary audience, but of course there are many other audiences as well. And so the example of like the Byron Kim installation in the library is another great example of that, where the PTA actually approached us and said, hey, we saw this, I'm really paraphrasing here, but long story short, hey, we were inspired by this artist who came in and gave a talk, and we've been thinking about how we might be able to do a project like that with skin tones in our school. And then we said, well, we'll call Byron. And we had a meeting, and we had another, and we just we really do work together. It's truly a collaboration. And then maybe the other side of that too. So it's a mistake not to make sure that people know that. And that really a huge part of a project like this is not only building trust, but maintaining the health of those communications. Some of the teachers, so like the school counselor I mentioned, she meets with us weekly. We have a one-on-one mentorship program that's on hiatus right now. But that program is a program where a community artist comes in and works with the child once a week for an hour throughout the school year. And we work with the school counselor to help match students that have the most need and the most, need a particular fit, things of that nature. And then sometimes parents reach out to us and want to do projects. And anecdotally, there was a parent as well who said, "Hey, my daughter came home telling me how she just learned something traumatic about the history of enslaved people in the United States, and she's a young Black girl, and she didn't want to be Black anymore, and she came home crying about this." And I mean, she's, yes, right, like she's just too little to really understand all the dynamics, and all she could think was like, well, then I don't want to be that, and that's what I am, and you're telling me this is what's going to happen to me. So her mom reached out and said, "You know what, I want a way for my child to see representations of celebrations of Blackness. Can we work together?" And so we collaborated with the designer in a 5th grade class, and the parent had like a selection of like 20 people she wanted to see, and the kids did illustrations. And now in the cafeteria, so imagine like rows of tables, right? Like picnic tables with like signs. They used to just have numbers. And now it's like, the Malcolm X table with a poster behind it, this gorgeous design poster where the 5th graders wrote it and the design team students drew it. And that's what now surrounds them. And so it was a way to think about how art could bring the desires of the parent to meet her child's trauma sort of closer, and using art as the connecting point there. So there's lots of instances like that, and it's super important. Thank you for raising that question.
Thank you, Lisa. There is a question from Trisha Earl. She is saying, "This is very inspiring. Thank you for your work. I love the encouragement and ownership that the students can have with this work. Have you seen a direct correlation with students improving in their schoolwork as a whole by being involved in this program? Also, are students not active in art making practice participating too? If yes, what are some of the changes you have seen in their confidence, interests, engagement, etc.?" What a wonderful question.
Trisha, thank you for a beautiful, thoughtful, complex question. I have like 1 minute, so I'm going to do my best to answer it in a healthy and responsible way, but I can follow up via email if that's useful to you. We don't formally track curricular performance and relationship, right? It's such a great question because it's like a grant writing question, right? Grants often want to know what's the impact and how do you measure it? And we do a lot of qualitative measurement, right? And so I would say that what our teachers are communicating to us are things like behavioral improvements or different levels of engagement, but we are not, for example, doing like test score comparisons, for example. That's not really part of it, but we are with one of the school folks tracking which students, like how many points of contact and impact can we at least start to show over the past handful of years. That's one thing. Also, if students don't want to participate, we never force them to, ever, 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 right? So if it doesn't make sense for a child and they're not enjoying it, they can just opt out. That's always fine. One story that I could share with you, one of our, well, he just graduated, but graduate students have been working with a child one-on-one for 3 years in a mentorship capacity. And that now graduated graduate student has a relationship with that child's family, his mom. I mean, they have a whole thing going. And little Elijah has done so many things with this mentorship. He's made his own Halloween costumes. He's built his own toys. He's had his own exhibitions. He's submitted to shows. But he's also just has this really powerful relationship with an artist and their friends. And this graduate student dedicated his graduate project to this student. And so it just really, it's these relationships that we can just see that maybe we don't know how to measure with a tape and put a number on it on a chart. But you can really see how students open up and connect with people over time. I really appreciate that question. And I really appreciate y'all spending a few minutes listening to me share my work today.
Thank you, Lisa, so much. I'm also conscious of time because Student Voices starts at 1 p.m. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure to hear your talk and everything about the project. I will let you go so you can make it to your other meeting.
Okay.
And thank you, everybody, for attending Lisa's talk.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Lisa.
everyone.
That was fantastic.
Thank you
That was
so much. I
really
really
fun.
appreciate it. I appreciate you all. And if there are questions, Brianna, that come up, feel free to email me and we can just kind of, I can share stuff with you and you can share it back out with your students too. Okay.
Sounds wonderful. I'll see you on Tuesday.
Okay. Oh, that's right. I'll see you Tuesday. That's right. I forgot. Okay.
All
See you
right.
next week.
See you in the
Thank you,
other room.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Lisa.